When you think about meal kit companies, what do you see? Probably long, complicated recipes and subscriptions you can't escape. But with the new Blue Apron, we're doing meal delivery differently. No subscription needed. Faster, easier meals. And the same dedication to quality we've always had. Shop 100+ meals at blueapron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Have you missed football?
Not one teeny tiny little bit.
Traitor, that's not allowed.
I know, it's outrageous. It happens every summer. I think watch so much football during the course of the season and then watch pretty much every game during the European Championships. I was just completely footballed out and delighted for a break, and I absolutely loved the Olympic Games. So that was a wonderful, I was going to say methadone to the heroin of football, but it was sort of better than that. It was like some healthy living alternative to taking any kind of drugs at all. It felt weirdly clean. Anyway, but now I'm starting to get excited about the prospect of a new season, and being back on the Rantcast is a big reason for that.
Very good. It's one of those weird bandwagons that seems to have started, that the Olympics was all Corinthian spirit, or should I say Olympic spirit, and that was all that was good, and football is all that is evil, and we need to get back into a cynical mindset. Do you buy into that one wholeheartedly?
No, in fact, I've made a sort of pre-season resolution with myself whereby I'm just going to be positive and optimistic about football. It's not to say I'm not going to acknowledge the things that are wrong about United, which are plentiful, but I'm just generally going to try and maintain a sunny disposition throughout the season, whatever come what may. Last season my resolution was not to get too frustrated with Nani, and I think I succeeded in that just about. So this season it's not to get frustrated at all, really, and just to be a bit more Corinthian spirited about the whole winning and losing of football,
Right.
I mean, I know it's not everyone's approach, and nor should it be. But obviously, I mean, the idea that the Olympics is somehow this wonderful sporting ideal is illusory, but it does have some things going for it in terms of, like, general cleanliness that football's missing. And one of those is just it was quite a unifying thing in a way that football's very sort of divisive. There was a sort of a generally positive, nice vibe around the fact that the Olympics were here, and Britain did incredibly well, like better than I ever dreamed would happen in my lifetime, and people didn't seem to be too nasty about it. There was a sort of general kind of like, oh, that's nice, everyone's here in the country and we're winning lots of medals, and also other people are winning medals, and that's nice too,
And Great Britain smashed the Aussies completely in the medals table, so that always helps, doesn't it?
Well, quite, yes.
Just to pick some random country to hate on there.
Yeah.
We also completely smashed out of Mongolia as well, Take that, you Mongolians.
Ooh, ah, yeah.
Well, Mongolians.
Where's your Genghis Khan? Where's your Genghis Khan?
Yes, completely random. So, onto the summer of football, because there's actually been quite a lot happening really around Manchester United, even though there hasn't been very many games, has there? So, shall we talk transfers? There's been a couple. I mean, they do exist. Manchester United opening the checkbook and paying actual cash money for players.
I don't believe that such a thing is possible. But no, we signed 2 players so far, Nick Powell and Kagawa Shinji. I did some research, by which I mean I asked my Twitter followers what the deal was, and Shinji Kagawa is his surname, his family name. Shinji is what we would call a first name, but in Japan you present them reversed, so surname first, Kagawa Shinji. But we'll be calling him Shinji Kagawa on this show, probably, I would imagine.
I should imagine we'll revert to, well, it's multiculturalism, isn't it? We bring in all these diverse countries and then we make them do it our way. That's multiculturalism, isn't it?
I'm not sure you've totally got that there, Ed.
Oh, I'm in the the Tory camp here. No, let's not get back to that one. So, and yes, Shinji Kagawa, a fine signing, I think. I mean, there was many rumours that we were going to sign him before the end of the season, of course, and eventually the deal was done at about £12 million, rising to more than 17, depending on bonuses. Nice bit of negotiation about what the bonuses should be, whether they should be on Kagawa's performances and success, which is what Borussia Dortmund apparently demanded, or on Manchester United's success, which is what Manchester United demanded, which it might give you a little bit of insight into the thinking around the club there. But I would say on the early evidence, and it is very early evidence of his performances in the United shirt, he'll be a real crowd pleaser and a fine signing.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it at some length on the Eurocast, but I think a wonderful signing and really excited. We've had a question from @office_monkey asking what our biggest hope for the season is, and a question from @beautifullyred asking which player are you most looking forward to seeing play this season. And for me, Kagawa's the answer to that second question, and it's sort of partly the answer to the first question, that he'll be really exciting and effective signing. And the idea of Kagawa, Cleverley, Nani, Valencia, Welbeck, Rooney all sort of linking up, obviously not all in the team at the same time unless we're 3-0 down with 10 minutes to go, but linking up around the edge of the area, loads of little 1-2s and dynamic, incisive running, that could be really fun to watch.
It could be very fun to watch, and he's a different kind of player than Manchester United have signed in the past, so and I think that is exciting. And I think when you talk about hopes and stuff for the new season and what might be exciting, you tend to focus on the new players that have come in, don't you, because it's something different, and I think there will be a lot of focus on Kagawa. I think maybe when we talk about some of the transfer rumours, it might be interesting to think about where Kagawa might fit into the side, because I have to say, when I'd seen him before, I've always thought of Kagawa as a player that really does only play one role, and that's it's a very loose role, but it's a role that's kind of in the hole, a free player between midfield and the attack, and that's essentially where he's played in pre-season when he's turned out for Fergie's side. But there might, this might change if United sign a particular player from down south. It'll be interesting to see where he fits into that. But look, I totally agree with you. I think it's really exciting. I'm not convinced he's the world's greatest player, but that's not really the point. I think he's a fine signing. I think the fans are going to love him. He's all about the team ethic, and he's got something very different. And it should be a very exciting acquisition for United.
I mean, we've been crying out for a signing like this for some time. I mean, not exclusively, but a creative attacking midfielder. That's something we've wanted for a long time.
Right, and so, you wait ages and two come along at once, because that's essentially what Nick Powell is as well. I know he played for Crewe up front a lot of the time, but he's looked like a player with loads of flexibility at all in the few games he's had pre-season, whether with the first team squad or he also played with the reserves at Peterborough, didn't he? And
yeah, Nick Powell's an interesting signing. I mean, first of all, it must be said, the man wears a cardigan, which is always to be encouraged. I think cardigan wearers at Man United, this is a good thing. But obviously, unless you've watched a lot of lower league football, there's an unknown quantity to a signing like that. Yeah. Presumably there are people in our listenership who've watched a decent amount of Crewe Alexandra or lower league football in England in general, but I'm totally ignorant about it, and I've never really seen him play. But whenever Fergie rates a young player, it's always exciting. It's always a gamble, but it's always exciting too.
Yes, and look, I don't think anyone's expecting him to break into the first team and make a huge difference to United's push on multiple fronts this season. There'll be some time in which he's allowed to bed in. League Two standards not hugely high, is it? So I suspect he'll spend much of the first half of the season with the reserves, and we'll see where we go from there. It's up to him really. He's 18. If he proves to be even better than we think, then he'll be fast tracked into the first team squad.
Yeah, I mean, from pre-season, what do you reckon the chances of that are?
I think they're minimal. I think he'll play most of the first sort of 4 or 5 months with the reserves, and we'll see where we go from there.
Right, interesting. It'll be interesting to see where we go from there. Talking of where we go from here, we should make it very clear that this episode comes out on Friday, but we're recording it on Tuesday, and the reason the chronology is important is because there's a lot of transfer rumours up in the air at the moment, and the big one that's occupying everyone's attention is obviously whether or not we're going to sign the Chilean Henriquez. That's what you meant from down south, isn't it? South America?
Yeah, absolutely. The Chilean lad is one that's been on the radar for United for years. I mean, literally years. He's come and trained with United at Carrington for 3 seasons in a row now. So I think that one's a done deal. A weird story in the Daily Mail, is that right? Or was it in the Mirror, actually, about him possibly joining City. But I wonder whether someone's just prompting that one along and trying to make United make the final decision about acquiring that player sooner rather than later. So I suspect that one's done. But of course, the rumour that won't go away is Robin van Persie. A very interesting one, isn't it? Because on the face of it, you'd say he's not really a player we actually need. Fine player though he is. A double player of the year last season, top goal scorer, and an outstanding season for Arsenal.
First of all, I should say that today is officially Robin van Persie Day. Last summer, there was a day for me which was officially Wesley Sneijder Day, and it was the day when I believed the deal might happen. And today is the day when I believe the Robin van Persie deal might happen. Now, we know what happened in the Sneijder case. I've been extremely sceptical of this, the timing of it in terms of season ticket renewals and all that kind of nonsense. But it's and just the idea that, to me, there's almost like a more likely sequence, which is the player uses United to leverage a move to Juventus or something like that. But it won't go away, will it? It doesn't seem like it's just paper talk, does it? I mean, Fergie said they put in a bid, which he never does that. That was really weird, right?
As I said, I'm not entirely convinced he's a player we need. Of course, so that would be to ignore the fact that he's an absolutely fantastic player and, of course, would be a fantastic addition to United's squad. Do I believe it's entirely real? Just yet, not sure about that. Even if you believe it's entirely real, do you believe that United will push from the bid, which seems to be, according to the smart observers, below 15 million, to somewhere much above that for a player who's just about to turn 29 and has a very checkered injury record? So it'd be one that's completely out of character with United's transfer strategy over the last 7 years. I don't remember the last time United bought anyone of that age for huge money, and so this would slightly odd. I wonder if it's real. I wonder whether United's interest wasn't driven by the fact that he's out of contract and someone thought that it might be done for a reasonable amount of money. Thinking about that transfer strategy, you'd have to wonder why exactly it is that United didn't spend on certain players in certain positions for so many years and then would spend, what does it look like, over £20 million on a forward when there's already 7 on the books?
Yeah, 29-year-old forward, as you say, with a terrible injury record. I mean, obviously incredibly talented player, and one of the things about those injuries is there's a potential that he hasn't exhausted himself in quite the way that other 29-year-olds would have done, and there was a certain kind of peak to his season last season where he looked better than he's ever looked. It's incredibly, kind of in some ways, it's just a very exciting prospect. The idea of just us randomly buying Van Persie. It's like a Tottenham Hotspur signing or something, It's just like, let's just buy this good player for no other reason than he's a really good player. Like when Newcastle signed Damien Duff. They didn't really... It's not the player they needed, but it's just he's available. There's a sort of circumstances converging, but it hasn't really gone smoothly, the transfer. It's been being talked about for a month or so. There's all sorts of different valuations. 22.5 million is the number that keeps doing the rounds today. As the transfer fee. I don't know what kind of negotiations around wages there would be. I mean, presumably he would be on Rooney level wages because he would perceive himself at that level.
Yep, and a long-term contract for an old player. So I think essentially we'd be talking about an investment in the 50 million to 70 million range, depending how long the contract is. Interesting to throw that much money at a player who factually has only scored more than 20 goals once in his career, right?
Yeah, right.
In the league. So totals he's done it 3 times or something like that. But look, so on the one hand, you can say absolutely fantastic player, pivotal to Arsenal last season, scores goals, drops deep, he's an all-round player, lovely feet, he's left-footed, he's different from what United have got. So you say that on the one hand. On the negatives side, you'd say he's getting old, he's injury prone, he's too similar to Rooney in that he does like to drop deep. It'll have a big effect on whether Kagawa plays much, or in fact where Kagawa plays, because he might end up playing on the wing. Is it the right balance of player that we need? Would we be running into the same problem we had with Berbatov, where Ferguson couldn't decide where each player plays? Would we be forced into playing a straight 4-4-2 when it's quite patently obvious that we don't have the midfield resources to do that? And all of these kind of questions. So it's weird thinking about that because, again, he's a fantastic player. And you have to be a player of the very top bracket to score 30 league goals, which is what he did last season. But there are a whole stack of questions about that transfer as well.
At Julio_G asks another crucial question about this and owns the fact that it's us getting ahead of ourselves a bit to even discuss this, but what would his arrival mean for the development of Danny Welbeck? And that's one of the really serious concerns I would have about Van Persie coming. Doran asked us at the back end of last season, do United need to sign a 4th striker? And we both agreed that they kind of do, but I'm not not sure either of us thought they need to just sign a first or second striker. We just seem very well stocked in the really top-end strikers range and really poorly stocked elsewhere.
Yeah,
still.
I mean, for me, if we're talking Rooney, Hernandez, Welbeck, and another Van Persie, then of course it's a hugely talented bunch. But two of those aren't going to be playing very much.
Not to mention the fact that Dimitar Berbatov's still a Manchester United player. So we've kind of got the fourth striker still, because we still haven't managed to find anyone who'll take him off our hands. I don't understand how it's possible that that's the case.
No, the club's looking for quite a large fee, I would suggest. I think Berbatov gave this one away when he said, I've heard they're asking £10 million.
Okay, so it's not that Berbatov's asking for his wages to be maintained necessarily at the same level.
I mean, it doesn't strike me as particularly Berbatov-like to do that, does it? I mean, I think he'll be looking for the right move. Of course, I mean, he's fabulously wealthy anyway. Doesn't seem like he's a player who's always knocked on the transfer door for a huge pay rise. Now, I think it's the same as with Thomas Cusack and Darren Gibson last summer. United are looking for the maximum fee they can possibly get out of this, but their hand could be forced. So if Berbatov's still around in January, they don't get the option of renewing for another year. So it's a case of taking what fee you can get, or letting him leave for nothing next summer and having him sit on the bench do nothing all season.
I mean, this stuff never happens, but there's a tremendous amount of logic in making him part of a Van Persie deal. I mean, I'd hate to see Berbatov play for another English team, because it would be heartbreaking, although the plus factor would be get to see him every week. But sort of makes sense for Arsenal if they're going to lose Van Persie. Berbatov would be an interesting fit in that team.
As you said, that stuff never happened. So yeah. Let's throw that one away. I think that's probably not realistic.
So at Matthew Abry asks the straightforward question that we've kind of been discussing, but to just get your take on it. Is Van Persie a good buy, or would you rather see that money spent in different areas of the team?
Look, this is not a zero-sum game necessarily. It's not necessarily an either or, although of course with the Glazers there's almost certainly a limited amount of budget. Although interestingly, and we'll get onto the IPO, they did tell investors that 40 million net would be spent this summer. So if it's an either or question, I'd rather that money was spent on a central midfielder, given United's attacking resources, which are still pretty significant, aren't they? If it's not an either or, if there's unlimited amounts of money because Uncle Malcolm's had another stroke and suddenly decided that it's not profit he's after, but a fantastic team, then yeah, sure, buy Van Persie and then buy a midfielder too.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't understand not just the financial resources that the Van Persie deal takes up, but the sheer amount of mind share at the club that a deal like that must be occupying in terms of the boss's attention. I mean, he seems to have put an awful lot into the Van Persie transfer. Maybe not. Maybe it's just the perception of it from reading paper talk about it. And really, he just made a phone call to Arsene Wenger and said, or he got David Gill to make a phone call to someone and say, can we have this lad? And they said only for this much money. And United said, probably not then.
Isn't that called negotiations?
Well, yeah, exactly. But maybe that doesn't take up a huge amount of energy. But it does seem to me like there's no transfer impetus anywhere else at United this summer. The one other deal that was floated for a long time, and United were a big part of the story, the transfer of Lucas Moura, a 19-year-old who's gone to Paris Saint-Germain for an astonishing amount of money. 45.5 million euros, I believe, is the reported amount. I've seen huge variation in what he's being paid wages from. Literally, I've seen 250k a week and 250k a month cited, which are obviously fairly significantly different sums. But United never felt like they were really close to that one to me.
Again, being the ultra cynic, I didn't believe that one was real from the start. I don't think United were ever in that bidding. Seriously. From the few conversations I've had with some Brazilian-based friends, they suggested that the offer was in the low 20s of millions of euros. So I think, again, maybe United's interest was real. Maybe they thought it was like a Hernandez thing where they could get a young player on a decent amount. Thinking of United spending upwards of 30 million euros on a young player, just didn't buy that was ever going to happen. It seemed logical to me that was the bidding, given that there were several interested parties. So funny thing is, of course, and this is a debate that went around on Twitter. A few years ago, United would have spent that kind of money. Remember when Wayne Rooney came in and United agreed, then it was in excess of £30 million with all the add-ons, and it was wrapped up into a £27 million fee in total. And so that kind of sparks the question, if the next Wayne Rooney came along now, and I don't know whether Lucas Moura is or not, I have to say I've barely ever seen him. I've seen him come off the subs bench for the Brazilian Olympic side, and that's it. But if the next Wayne Rooney was to come along today, would United be able to buy him? And the suggestion, I think quite loudly, is no.
I always think about this when a young player goes for a lot of money, because you and I had an MSN conversation. This is how long ago it was. We had an MSN instant message conversation, like it was the early 2000s, which it was, where you said, of course, the club is so well run, that's why we can spend £30 million on a teenager. Tragically, that has very much proven not to have lasted the decade since that happened, or the 7 years since that happened, and now we're kind of really financially terribly run, and we can't afford to do stuff like that. And Ferguson came out and said it's just crazy they're spending 45.5 million euros on a player, and I was on Twitter and said very much the same sort of thing of like, how can he say that? He did exactly that. And lots of people kind of come back at me and said, well, Rooney was proven in the Premier League. And like, no, Rooney had looked good in the Premier League. You're not proven in the Premier League at that age. He was already an international, and it's like, yeah, all those things are true. But the fact is, Fergie didn't say it's crazy to spend this much on this 19-year-old. He said it's crazy to spend that much on a 19-year-old.
Rooney had played like 50 odd games for Everton before joining us. Moura's played 50 odd games for Sao Paulo. Rooney had had a few caps for England. Moura's got 15 caps for the full Brazilian side. I know he was playing with the Olympic side. This summer didn't even play that much. So it's not like they're out of bounds. Okay, so Moura's not been playing in the Premier League, but since when has Ferguson prioritised that, right? If he thinks it's the talent he's after, it's the talent he's after, right? So I'm not convinced that's a valid argument. Point being, United used to spend that money on young players if they wanted to. Now they won't. They're looking for young players, with sell-on value and young players below a certain bracket of total fee. And the other interesting point, I thought it was interesting, and maybe people disagree, but I think the other interesting point is, of course, in those 8 years, there's inflation, retail price inflation, average of, 4% a year or whatever it is, that Rooney fee looks even bigger. It starts to creep up to similar levels. If you actually take football inflation into account, so what's the average price rises in the football market, and methodologies accepted, right? There's some challenges you can make to the transfer price index scoring system in terms of how they calculate average inflation and stuff like that. But that's one way of doing it. They calculate that Rooney's value in terms of football inflation would be over 60 million now, right? So that's just taking into account how much the market has been overheated, and Ferguson's used that word himself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I just think the fact that we never really felt in that deal, although there were some prominent friend of Fergie type journalists, mentioning no names, of people that have blocked you on Twitter, who were saying that he was on his way for medical and all that sort of thing, and it was a very real deal. And I don't understand the way the media is handled at United. I don't get it. I found Ferguson's talk about it incredibly painfully disingenuous. That Moura thing is a classic example of the disingenuousness that Fergie's prepared to put out there. When he said, I think 4.5 million euros for that 19-year-old's crazy, I don't think he's necessarily even aware of how similar that is to the Rooney deal, but if he thought about it, he would be, and it's just horrible to see him back the Glazers to the hilt, defend United's dealings in the transfer market, and the great thing for him is he can always say, yeah, look how many league titles we've won in the last 5 years or 6 years. We got to the Champions League final 3 times, won it once. We're doing brilliantly. None of that covers up the fact that we're hugely underperforming in the transfer market.
Given United's resources, when you remove debt from the equation, then United, as Andy Green from the Anders Red blog said, United should be the biggest swinging financial dicks around, and quite clearly the club is not. So that kind of covers why that's happening. I think that's a nice segue into some financials. Shall we talk IPO and the dark day that was the New York Stock Exchange on Friday?
We've got some questions about that. The first from @CanTheyScore. How many shares did the Rantcast buy in the IPO?
Well, none, because I'm a savvy investor and I wouldn't put my money into this at all. I think I'd rather put my money into a casino and just have a gamble, because that's exactly what you'd be doing with it.
I don't get it, Ed. Explain what's happened, how it's happened. You said it wouldn't have happened by now, but it has.
I actually think since they got kicked out of Hong Kong and kicked out of Singapore and quite clearly didn't get the investor excitement about this IPO that they thought they were going to get, I thought it probably wouldn't happen by now. But they pushed it through, so the bare bones are they've sold about 16.7 million shares, half of which was sold by the selling shareholders, which is the Glazer family, and half of which was sold by the club itself. And that's about 10% of the club, the total number of shares in the club. So they were sold, priced eventually at $14 each in the prospectus that was launched earlier this summer. United was looking for a range between 16 and 20, so already they've got a significant significantly lower price than they'd hoped for each of those shares, and obviously that's affected the amount of revenue. So in the end they raised about $233 million, half of which went directly into the Glazer family's bank account, and half of which will be used to pay down debt after the costs of the IPO taken into account. That cost about 12 million plus some other fees and stuff like that. So it looks like about 60 million pounds, not dollars, pounds, will come off the total debt, and the total debt was put in the prospectus at 437 million. So it will save United about 5 million pounds a year-ish in interest on that bond, although of course because interest you can write that off against tax, the actual figure will be more like 4 million-ish post-tax in saving, and because the IPO has cost about $12 million, so call that 8 and a bit million pounds. Again, Andy Green calculated it's going to take United over 2 years just to break even on the costs of the IPO in the first place. Well, meanwhile, the Glazer family put $110 and a bit million into their bank account on Friday.
I just don't even know what to say, you know what I mean? It's so horrible that I just can't find, because there's so much misinformation and so much, understandably, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, because it's fairly complex financial matters, and you just see United sell shares for X amount of money and people think, oh great, we can buy some players, but this is about raising personal wealth for the Glazer family.
The anger is there because in the first iteration of the prospectus, it very clearly said that all monies raised will be used to pay down debt. So effectively all the shares that were being issued would be issued by the club, and they changed that around so they could, and I assume this was strategy all along. I assume they weren't just suddenly deciding to do this. But in the second iteration of the prospectus, the amendment prospectus, they decided to take all this cash out. And the word on the street is that they need it because their US businesses are failing, plus they've got this huge pile of debt, we believe, that was taken out to pay off the PIK loans, the famous PIK loans, or infamous, should I say, and that's probably about $400 million, so they probably need the money, and here's the theory: if there were covenants attached to those PIK loans about performance, or those second round of loans, probably hedge fund based, and they were similar to the covenants attached to the first set, then maybe United didn't meet those covenants in terms of financial performance, and the interest rate went up, hence the decision to list now, much in the same way that when the old PIK loans went from 14 to 16.5% interest, the Glazer family decided to go to the market with bonds. They've decided to go to the market with shares this time. So again, it's all financial engineering based solely around the Glazer family's own personal needs, wants and desires, and nothing at all to do with benefiting the club. And I have to say, this is deeply, deeply frustrating, not only because they've lied and it's all about them, because they've done that all along, but because there are still people out there, still United fans out there that somehow think this was a good thing. This was a good thing, and then somehow it was they were doing a good thing for the club by paying down some debt. And hey, I've heard a lot of apologies for the strategy. Look, they're the owners; they can do what they want. Well, yes, they are the owners, and they can do what they want. But also, there's quite a lot of fans who believe that there should be some kind of alignment between the supporters and the owners. And of course, maybe that's pipe dream. Maybe that's a pipe dream, but there's that doesn't mean that we can't be angry about what's happened, because I think it was a pretty dark day. And of course, in this, found out that on April the 30th, the day that Manchester City, with all their wealth, were beating United in what proved to be the absolutely pivotal match at Eastlands, was the day that United was effectively registered in the Cayman Islands, and there's layers and layers of holding companies in between. But United's ultimate company is now based in the super secretive tax haven of Grand Cayman.
Yeah, which means you have to go there to do your research. So, swings and roundabouts.
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose if you want to buy a share and head off to the AGM, of course, if the Glazers decide to hold one, because they're not obliged to by the SEC, because they're listed as an emerging growth company. It was interesting for a 134-year-old company whose revenues fell 5% last year.
It's really painful talking about this stuff because there's that sense of complete impotence and inability to do anything about it. I've seen a lot of anger and a lot of kind of, what can we do? A sense, but people are never willing to say, well, not everyone, but the collective is never willing to say, turn your back on Manchester United. Don't go to matches, don't buy shirts. Some people will not buy merchandise. Some people will write letters saying they won't support the sponsors. It's kind of a shame that everyone that feels strongly about United doesn't just write to Audi and say, while you continue to support Manchester United, I'll never buy an Audi as long as I live, sort of thing.
Well, of course, I mean, the Supporters Trust arranged for that kind of thing to happen. So they had two parts to that. One was to write to bankers and investors, and they set out a template which you could use, or you could write your own message, and behind that engine was a whole bunch of people who are potential investors, and the second was to write to sponsors. So 1 million people did that. So it's not like this was a small movement. Of course, it might not have a significant impact yet. We don't know, but I think we can see from the sheer amount of negative press that has been generated by this IPO, not just in the football press, not just from United blogs, but in the financial analyst press, which are almost universally negative about this IPO, and negative not just in terms of this is a bad investment, but this is a bad management decision, right? And when the Wall Street Journal and publications like it, and Market Watch in particular, I'm thinking here, say that it's not only about a poor investment just from the pure investment cycle, but also about the type of management that is behind this company, and they're critical of that tells you something. And I think there is a momentum behind that. Of course, it doesn't mean that suddenly we're about to get rid of the Glazers. They're completely entrenched here. As we mentioned, we've talked about this before, the voting rights associated with the Class A shares that were issued to the market is 1/10 of the voting rights of the Class B shares, which were retained by the Glazer family. And so they've managed to keep, of course they sold some of their shares, but they managed to keep over 98% voting control. And even if they sold more than 50%, in fact they could sell even more than that. Within the covenants of that share sale, they were always going to retain 67% control. So effectively they can make decisions about this company forever without being accountable to anyone until they sell.
So I've got a few questions, which I'll try and remember what they all are and take them one at a time. And the first question is, why would any investor invest in this IPO? It seems like it was overpriced. The company is misclassified under the IPO very clearly. The growth potential is inherently limited because it's commercialized pretty much as far as it will go to breaking point, and there's no evidence that success on the pitch is in an upward trend. And also, it's a company run by people whose sole interest is to make as much personal wealth out of the company as possible.
Okay, so I'll tell you why, because it's a low-level IPO, $233 million raised. It's almost nothing. It won't be the pros, as in it won't be the serious fund managers that are looking at certain targets that will do this. It will be a level down from that, where they're looking at potentially taking a punt on a long-term growth opportunity, and that this is the pitch from the Glazer family. It's a long-term growth opportunity. If you buy that one, fine, and there'll be some fan-driven, and fan in a loose sense, kind of, what should we call them? Follower-driven purchases as well. There'll be some minor level stuff, although, not significant. So, but it's not a big punt, right? If you've got even a tiny fund chucking $5 or $10 million dollars at this, it's not much, right? So I would think there's very low level risk associated with it from the kind of macro sense, right? The big pile of cash that any one single fund will put into this. I don't think there'll be an awful lot. And, even if it tanks, then they're not going to lose the whole size of the fund. And so that's de-risked in a certain sense. It's trading on the secondary market. It's all of that kind of stuff. I've seen lots of comparisons with Facebook, and that might happen. Maybe the stock will tank. I mean, it's trading at very low volumes, or 2 days into it. So there's not an awful...
Which you'd expect, given the profile profile that you just laid out of like long-term investment.
Right. And, so look, we'll see, right? This will play out over a few weeks. Most analysts say that it's still overpriced. So if that turns out to be true, there'll be a correction. But we'll see over a few weeks. The thing is, of course, the Glazers already got what they wanted, which was a chunk of cash. Now, if it does tank, as the analysts are saying, that might have an impact on what happens next. And the way it's structured is almost certainly the Glazers want to sell off more at some point down the line, realise a bit more capital out of this. They probably need the capital. So the stock price will determine at what point they sell. I mean, when you're in a leverage buyout, you do sell eventually. And all the talk of the Glazers being in it for the long term is always has been nonsense, because the only way they'll actually realise some value on the capital is to sell the club, or they have to start giving away dividends, of course. But United don't make enough money to give away dividends, because if they're going to do that, then they have to pay down all the debt, and quite often debt is cheaper than equity. So I think what they'll do is they'll realise the capital from the company by selling it off, and the share price will determine at the speed they do that.
So the higher the share price, the quicker they'll sell?
Well, the more motivation there is. Of course, the lower the share price, the more correction the market has given to their assumptions about what United's worth. And also, it might be more difficult for them to go back to the market and get more cash if they really need it. So if the rumours are true about them desperately needing the cash because their other parts of their business empire is failing, if the motivation is there to sell and the stock price isn't very high, they might just decide to get rid of the whole thing. And that's a difficult calculation, actually, because given the amount of debt United have got and the amount of debt they took on when the PIK loans were paid off, they probably need to sell for like £1 billion just to break even on it, and it's not valued much more than that at the moment. So there you go.
I didn't quite follow it, but I'm going to listen back to the show and assume that I'll get it second time around. With reports today that if IPO shares drop as low as $5, the Glazers will look to sell the club.
So I read that piece. I read that piece in the Independent. I think that's incorrect.
Okay, this is a Twitter question from @JohnnyB007. It's got a follow-up part saying, even if that's the case, realistically, who could afford to buy us, especially without landing us in the same position or worse, like in a Malaga sort of situation?
Right. Okay. So there's a lot of speculation in that question. So the first part, if the share price drops to $5, which was what Privco, they're a private company, research company in the States, that fairly well respected, said. Actually, Morningstar, even better known analysis firm, said about $10 was a fair rate. So even between those things, the Independent piece, I think, basically just reading between the lines, didn't understand the difference between kind of enterprise value and stock price, market capitalization. So they got that bit confused because they got all their numbers wrong about the value of the company. So if the Glazers did sell at that rate, and I'm not sure they would, depends on how desperate they were, the sale price would be the market cap plus the debt, effectively, and probably some kind of premium. There's always a premium on a private sale, so that would be the sell price, and that would still be well over $1 billion.
So really, sovereign wealth or oligarch, that's your only choices at that level, or them to...
Or they float the whole lot, right? And I think from a fan's perspective, if we want to say that actually United can run on its own 2 feet, and we'd actually like fans to get involved in this and own part of the club, and over 35,000 fans were actually small shareholders in the last IPO, I'd suspect, given the nature of the last 7 years, that you could add a multiple of 10 to that, maybe even more. Maybe there'd be 500,000 to 1 million fans who would buy something, right? So could fans have a realistic block of shares if the Glazers went to the market and said it's a full IPO and it's full voting rights on all the shares? And that might be, that's a big opportunity both for the Glazers to realise the capital on the asset they own and make a decent price, maybe not the profiteering block of profit they want, but a good price and a fair price, and also for fans to then have a say in the future of the club, and maybe that's a pipe dream because we don't know exactly what will happen to the stock price, but again, there's an opportunity there, and that might be the end game for this.
Yeah, it'd be nice if it was. Although, of course, in a way, this situation that we're in is reaping the cost of becoming more commercial. The fact that we privatised in the first place and we became an increasingly commercial enterprise instead of just a football club. That was what attracted these nefarious, profiteers to get involved in the first place. But there's always been nefarious profiteers in football. It's just this is a particularly egregious example. I basically have no time for the people that defend the Glazer ownership. It's got to the point where I feel feel about them like I feel about people that vote Tory. Just like, you're just not paying enough attention on whatever it is you're putting into this that makes you believe that A, it's okay to vote Tory, or B, I probably shouldn't use that as an example because some people probably genuinely do think that's okay.
But you'll be getting party political hate messages now.
Yeah, let's take that out of the equation. If you think the Glazer ownership is good for the club or even okay for the club, you're just not paying close enough attention. And the incredible short-termism of the kind of, well, we haven't gone bust yet. I don't think we're really going to go bust. The Glazers wouldn't have kind of done the leverage buyout that they did if they thought that the cost of that was going to be complete, like doing a Leeds. You know, that doesn't seem to be what's going to happen because, as you've said many times, the Glazers' business model is based on us being good enough to finish fourth and qualify from the group and the Champions League. It's not based on us competing for the league every season. It's just that if you want United to be the dominant force in English football, then you need there to be a different ownership model because Sir Alex is going to retire and all this is going to come home to roost at some point.
Yes, you suspect so, don't you? Quite apart from how exactly United will attract a manager with the transfer budget of 20 to 25 million net per season, I don't know. Of course, that was promised to investors. So this is not paper talk. This was United's vice chairman, Edward Woodward, during an investor presentation with investors, promising them that United would stick to the historical rate of spending in the transfer market. They said 20 to 25 million over the last 15 to 20 years. I think they used the example. Interesting, they didn't use the period of the Glazer family ownership there, which of course is a lot less. But that was a promise. That's why we know that they gave guidance that there would be about 40 million net spend this summer. So a top manager in the current market, is going to realise that there's a limitation to what they can do if that's the promised amount of spend per year. There's a big, huge bet, and it's quite clear from the investor roadshow that United are hoping that financial fair play will cool the market down and they can still run the business model which is around making profit as opposed to a business model that's about maximising the return on the revenues that a club makes.
And none of that is about, success on the pitch, is it? None of that doesn't become the prime motivator for all that stuff.
Oh, no, the prime motivator is profit, and if success on the pitch helps that, then they're aligned. But let's not make any mistake about the Glazer family wanting to win the Champions League. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference to their business model if United win the Champions League or don't, as long as they go far enough, the club goes far enough. And of course things would change if United dropped out, but we've had those conversations before, and we'll see what happens there. But again, I just thought it was a very dark episode for the club over the summer. I thought it was another case of a wedge being driven between fans and Sir Alex as well, with some of his comments about real fans realising that it's made no difference to the club, the Glazer ownership and the debt associated with it. I don't even know what a real fan is, but I don't know how a real fan could say that more than £500 million having left the club as a result of the business model had made no difference to the club. I don't know how you make that calculation, but anyway, it was. And then, so that's one dark bit, that wedge between the fans and Sir Alex. I think the way the IPO was conducted is extremely dark. I think the fact that United is now based in the Cayman Islands, purely so the Glazers can conduct their business model in total secret. I think the fact that United is something of a joke in the investor community right now, given the coverage that's in the media and the analysts about the business model associated with this club. And I think it's all been very, very dark, and I don't see it getting better quickly, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel, which is there will be an exit at some point, and it's just what that exit is will determine how light the end of that tunnel is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the other light at the end of the tunnel, which I think is really important to consider, which is that, and I mean this with the greatest kind of sincerity and respect, it's only football. It's like, this is really a thing that loads of people care passionately about, and that's something which is to be respected and accepted. But, the worst case scenario here is that Manchester United, stolen out from under the nose of its fans, becomes a less successful football team. And, what that says about society and all that, and the way it was done, and the kind of the fact that it was so unnecessary, and the fact that it happened at the hands of some profiteers, is all really unfortunate. But that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, are you trying to say it's only a game? Because look, we've had this conversation before, and we know that's nonsense. So yeah, anyway.
Well, no, except it's really not nonsense. nonsense. I'm not just saying like, oh, it's only a game. I'm saying the worst case scenario is that the football team you love and support becomes less successful. There's lots of people in the world that support football teams that have never won anything and get a huge amount out of that. Now, the way it's happened is painful, frustrating, horrible. Use the word dark. That's exactly how I felt about. Specifically, that's how I felt about Fergie when he said that, because I was basically like heartbroken by that, by the kind of disrespect inherent in that. But basically the sheer self-serving lie-ness of it, you know, that's how it felt to me. You know, it kind of felt like a betrayal. But I'm just saying, in absolute terms, if United become the 6th or 7th best team in England, that's what's at stake. It's, you know, it's not even, I mean, in a broad sense, like the end of the football club is potentially at stake, but that's like a long way off, you know.
In any case, I think we're in agreement. It's not a great episode for the club.
Terrible.
So we'll see where it goes from here. I mean, the club won't actually make any pronouncements on financials or anything like that. There's a time period when they're supposed to be quiet, and so we probably won't see United saying much about financials for a little while. We'll see after that. We might not get much information at all because there's a very limited amount they actually have to release now, and because of that, perhaps we can talk about football, because there is actually a new season coming up,
and it's really exciting. Like, it's so exciting. What an exciting team we've got. There's a couple of problems. Here's a few Twitter questions to perhaps indicate some of those slight problems. What's our new formation in 12-13? 0-3-7 perhaps, with a couple of injured defenders, no left back or right back backup, no central midfield once Cleverley and Anderson are injured. That's from @Simon T. Graham. And then @DavyMacker99 says, looks like Fergie's playing his patented donut formation again this season. No midfielders of note have come into the club over the summer, at least not ones that can play in the centre circle rather than around the edge of the D. But we've still got, you know, Paul Scholes for another season.
Yes, we have, although I think there was a telling line in one press report when it came to the end of the tour, the globe-trotting tour, which said Paul Scholes was being given a rest after a tiring pre-season. I thought, oh my God, they needing to rest him already. It tells you about the state of our midfielder. He'll turn 39 soon, 38, sorry, and I do him a disservice, and Giggsy's 39, right? So it's, look, there's only so much Paul Scholes he's going to play this season. Carrick is the wrong side of 32. We have to desperately hope he stays fit, and then the rest of it is hope. Will Darren Fletcher's bowels allow him to play, and play seriously, and I don't mean in a friendly at Aberdeen? Will Tom Cleverley stay fit, and will he kick on from where we thought he was when he was fit, and will Anderson be able to stay fit and perform at his best? I mean, you know, the last two you'd say history tells you no, because Anderson's been injured 5 seasons in a row and never been able to put a consistent run together, and Tom Cleverley's had a bad injury in each of his last 4 campaigns. Darren Fletcher's barely been fit for, well, it seems like a year now, and he's got a condition that many people say is chronic, and he'll never be able to be the same player again. So essentially we are back to a you know, trio we can rely on in midfield of Carrick, Scholes and Giggs. Can't even put Park Ji-sung in there, of course, now, because he's gone. So but it will be interesting, and that does dictate the formation, because the obvious formation that people thought of when Kagawa was signed was a 4-2-3-1, with Kagawa as the loose man in that 3, and 2 of Nani, Valencia and Young either side, and Rooney as the kind of front man rather than the deep man now. But there's a few question marks around that, you know, in terms of United personnel in that 2, the central midfield, and what happens with Rooney if, for example, Van Persie was signed. So I don't think it's quite set yet what United might be doing tactics-wise.
No, it's crazy. It's really so up in the air. We asked by Avancat10, do you see us playing a 4-1-3-2, which you could potentially see that is incredibly attacking and leaves a ridiculous amount of room for Michael Carrick to fill on his own. But, you know, you said there's 3 that we can rely on in central midfield. I'm not sure when the last time we could rely on Ryan Giggs in central midfield was.
There's no chance of that formation. I mean, we're talking about Carrick covering the whole of central midfield on his own, which of course is what he does when Anderson plays. No, I'm being cruel. So harsh. Look, United get overrun in midfield playing 2 in there. Could quite frequently get overrun playing 3 in there. So I think playing 1 in there is a recipe for complete and total disaster.
There's a question, do we need a midfield enforcer in the Tiote De Rossi mould, or could we play with 2 or 3 ball-playing midfielders? I think that's from @MyImpishGrin, which is an excellent Twitter handle. I think there's a couple of things about that. First of all, I think it would be incredibly good if we could buy a ball-playing spoiler, you know, a hard but fair air player who knew what to do with the ball at his feet. I mean, that would just, Daniele De Rossi is obviously not on the market, but if we could sign Daniele De Rossi, I'd be the happiest man alive, basically. And not
just for the balance of the squad. I'm not necessarily saying that this person would play every week. I think we could do with a real evil bastard in there, to be honest. And just because there's no one. Actually, Ferguson, interesting quotes this summer, which I think you can interpret as United are not going to do this, but said that you don't need a tackler anymore. Look at the way, for example, Barca or Spain play, and you can. And Michael Carrick does a great job, which of course we said. Michael Carrick did a great job last season. I think it's just the balance there, and I think increasingly, given he's getting on too, and the type of player he is, he does need some legs alongside him, and so I think an all-rounder in the middle there, someone who can pass and start attacks from a deeper area but cover a lot of ground in the central midfield would be a real asset. Someone who's evil and when we need to kick someone, because you still do sometimes need to kick someone, that would be a huge bonus for United too. I can't see either of them happening now, so it will be much the same as we were last year, except all a year older.
Barcelona have got Busquets. It's just worth saying. Iniesta and Xavi don't play on their own in the centre, do they? Busquets kicks people and then gives them the ball.
Yeah, well, mainly he pretends to be kicked and rolls around. I mean, Busquets, look, you can forget that he's actually a fine player too. He recycles the ball very well, Busquets. And
yeah, sure, but we're talking about an all-rounder. He serves that role for them. It's it's disingenuous for Fergie to say, look at the way Barcelona play, because they do it as well. I just had a question just this minute on Twitter, actually, from Joel Duffy, asking exactly the same thing, not original, but the state of our central midfield is a must-discuss topic. And he's right, because, they were kind enough to ask me over at the Can They Score blog to write up some season predictions, and one of the questions was what you're most worried about, and it's just so blatantly obvious that the thing that's the most consternating about the state of United squad is that central midfield role, and Fergie is, once again, another summer's gone by where he hasn't addressed the situation. He thinks he's got enough resources there. He knows what he's talking about. He came within a millisecond of winning the league last season with the same problem. But Paul Scholes looks exhausted by the end of last season. And by the end of the season before that, he really, really, really looked exhausted. So, he was exhausted after 6 months after having a 6-month break. 5 months after having a 6-month break. What's he going to be like just having had the regular break in between the seasons? He's not going to play very much. I don't know enough about how cleverly we'll adapt to, you play cleverly alongside Carrick. In my head, that's like, oh yeah, that could definitely work, playing a 4-2-3-1 with Cleverley and Carrick in there. But it's very lightweight, so definitely could get run over. But in terms of like playing two ball-playing midfielders right in the centre of the park, they could do the job. But only in a 4-2-3-1. You never want that in a 4-4-2, would you?
Well, no. Yeah, there's a real risk against some of the top sides that they just wouldn't get enough of the ball, no matter how good they are with the ball.
I mean, there's a real risk against a lot of the not so good sides. That's the real problem, is actually not how we stack up against the real big boys, because we've done okay getting by, not necessarily being the best in one-to-ones against the big sides in recent seasons, but it's the fact that we get overrun by much lesser teams that becomes the real problem.
Well, should we do a few quick predictions? I think it's only fair for the season preview podcast that we do a quick roundup of predictions. So I suppose the big one, Paul, can United win the league?
I thought you were going to say League Cup then. Yeah, they can. Of course they can. I don't think they can be favourites at this stage of the season, since, we did well to get as close as we did. We did incredibly well to get as close as we did last season, albeit at the same time we also did really badly to throw it away at the end of last season.
Okay, maybe I didn't phrase it properly. Will we win the league? It's predictions time.
No, I'm definitely not going to say that, because I have to say the bad words if I say that. I think that we are not going to win the league this season. I do not feel confident that we're going to win the league. I would very, 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 very much love it if we did win the league. But I think that on the balance of all things being equal, Vidic, it's unsure how effective he's going to be able to be. We're so reliant on certain key players not getting injured. The form of Rooney's a huge doubt. Who we're going to sign is still very unclear. City looked like they were really, the incredible momentum they would have taken out of last season. They haven't lost any of their big players. We haven't signed an alternative to Yaya Toure for us, which is what we so badly need. I just don't see us winning the league this season, sadly. What about you?
No, I think United will come second. I'm afraid the dark neighbours from across the city will be winning it. I'm sorry, it's a bit negative, I know, but I don't think Kagawa makes big enough difference. And even given, take the positive spin on it, United won't get the same level of injuries as last season, and Kagawa as an extra dimension. But I also think City probably won't wobble in the way that they did at key stages. I suspect they'll be slightly more tightly knit units. What Mancini does with Carlos Tevez is still an open question, but he appears to be happy now-ish. At least he seemed to be that way in pre-season. So I think on balance City are probably just a little bit stronger and strong enough. What about Europe? United get out of the groups this time? Is that our ambition?
Yeah, it would be lovely to get to a semi-final and fluke our way to a final. That's my official prediction, is a ridiculous kind of slightly fluky draw to get to the final, because I do think we stack up pretty well in cup competitions once again. I think the best of this United side is going to be absolutely wonderful. That's what I think about the season ahead. I think when we perform well, it's going to be a complete joy to behold. Loads of goals and brilliant goals at that. So I'm really excited on that score, and I think a cup competition is definitely a better chance of silverware this season.
I don't think we're going all the way to the final in the Champions League, but I do think that's pretty open competition this season. I think Ferguson will clearly take it a lot more seriously. I think if he repeated the same mistake of assuming United would get out of the group, would be a huge error. So I think United will take it a lot more seriously, and I'd expect United to get through a couple of knockout rounds. So I'd say semi-final is my prediction. And what about the big competition for the season, the Capital One Cup? Are you a fan of Cock, Paul?
What's the Capital One Cup, Ed?
It's the old League Cup. It's what was the Carling Cup.
Oh no, really? It's been sponsored. Okay, Capital One are the most evil providers of credit. They like credit cards for people that can't afford credit cards because they get to charge extortionate interest rates to make up for their bets. They're proper baddies. I think we could do well in the League Cup. We always do well in the League Cup sometimes.
Always sometimes, yeah. Well, we might get to see Bebe play.
I just thought about all the times we didn't, and that's the really exciting thing. And talking of the man himself, we have a question from @Caddies and Young, which is, if you could give Bebe one superpower, what would it be?
Crossing.
Crossing. I'm not sure crossing's a superpower, although David Beckham makes it into one. Yeah, the superpower of set pieces would be one for me. No, I think clearly the power of flight, because then Bebe could do the good we all know he's capable of doing around the world.
Very good. I can't better that.
Talking of Super Bebe, for the first time ever, the Rankcast curtain raiser is coming with your chance to win a fabulous prize, and it really is a fabulous prize. I want to say for a start, everything I'm about to say is true and real. None of this is a wind-up. None of this is a hilarious practical joke. We have to give away a unique, exclusive Bebe 7 gingham shirt. It looks exactly like a completely legitimate Manchester United shirt. Can't promise you that it is one, but it definitely looks and feels exactly like the terrible the wonderful gingham for this season. Resplendent with Bebe 7. Antonio Valencia may have got the number 7 shirt, depriving its rightful owner.
A travesty, injustice.
But right now, in my cupboard upstairs, unworn, is a medium Bebe 7 shirt. The medium is the reason it's unworn, and we're giving it away as a competition prize, because the good people in the Hong Kong handling department sent the wrong size out, and I look comically ridiculous in a medium.
Framed.
Ed has just agreed to frame and send out the Bebe 7 shirt, so if you want to win this beautiful thing, a unique collector's item that will unquestionably be worth as much as a Manchester United IPO share offering, you can win this simply by tweeting @UTD_Rantcast and @UnitedRant. Include us both in that. I should win the Bebe 7 shirt because, and then just finish the tweet and we'll pick the one we like the most. If you could use the hashtag Rantcast so we make sure we see it, that would be much appreciated. So you just need to send the @reply to me and Ed, that's @UTD_Rantcast and @UnitedRant, just with the words, I should win the Bebe 7 shirt because, and then finish the sentence and use the hashtag Rantcast. So it's creative use of character limits. Just one tweet. If it's across multiple tweets, it doesn't count. And that's it. That's the first ever Rantcast prize. And to get you inspired with your creativity, we've had a question from @ManUnitedYouth saying, which Olympic events do you think United players or staff could have got gold in? Ashley Young and diving not allowed, too obvious. So first of all, I think that we should say what we haven't said, which is that during the Olympic Games, it became very clear that Rio Ferdinand was going to arrange a trial at Manchester United for Usain Bolt. So assuming that he, as he inevitably will, gets the gig as a right winger for United, Usain Bolt 100 metres, 200 metres and 4x100 metres relay. Apart from that, obviously Mike Phelan in the dressage.
Who would be riding Mike Phelan?
Yes, Sir Alex in a top hat telling Mike Phelan to piaf. That one's for Tricia, because I didn't know what piaffing meant, but I've now learned. I reckon Hernandez would be a good archer, because he's good at getting things on target, obviously. David De Gea would probably do a mean line in handball.
I think Anderson would win the freestyle wrestling, hands down.
Yes, clearly.
Rooney in the boxing.
Yeah, as a young man, he did a bit of that. Nemanja Vidic in the boxing, just steps into the ring, the other guy goes, no, fair enough, you get the medal. And yeah, so I think between them, the United team could win some gold. Antonio Valencia could give Bolt a run for his money, I reckon.
Yeah, maybe. So United actually have an actual, real life, actual proper competitive game. It's not in some far-flung country, although Liverpool might feel like it on some occasions. At the weekend, well, actually I lie, on a Monday night, United are playing Everton at Goodison Park, the opening game of the season.
Yeah, nothing better than a Monday night kick-off for the opening game of the season, eh, Ed?
Traditions, don't you love them?
I mean, I think it's very clear from everything we've said that we don't really know how United are going to line up, but I'm going to predict De Gea, Evra, Vidic. I think it looks like from pre-season, it looks like Vidic's first choice centre-back.
He's the only fit one, so yeah, Ferdinand and Vidic in the centre and someone at right-back, and we're not quite sure whether Phil Jones is fit either, so there might be a bit of a problem there too.
We had a really good question from Matt X-Birchie, actually, which was about who's going to get the most time at right-back this season between Raphael, Jones, Smalling and Valencia, and I really do hope it'll be Raphael. I really do hope he gets it together and has a good season. He had a really good Olympics until the final when he had a really terrible game, really awful, and also lost his head at the end of it in that impetuous way that he does.
Look, so it depends on his fitness. So there's a caveat here. He's obviously played quite a lot recently. So does that count as his pre-season, which is basically what Ferguson said, or is he knackered and needs a break? So if it counts as his pre-season, I think he'll start the season at right back because there basically aren't any other choices, and then he'll carry on in that position until he makes a mistake, and then Ferguson will drop him unceremoniously as he is wont to do, and then we'll find out how good Antonio Valencia is at right back, because there aren't actually many choices. Smalling's out for months, and it's touch and go on Phil Jones' fitness for the weekend, I believe, and Johnny Evans is out for some time too with that ankle knack.
And then I think central midfield, we're going to have Cleverley and Anderson together repeating their form of the beginning of last season. I don't really think that. Carrick and Scholes in the centre of midfield, and I don't know, Ryan Giggs on the left, Valencia on the right. I'm kind of depressing myself, but no, I'd love to see that patented 4-2-3-1. But then there's a slight downside to that, which is that there's a couple of downsides. One, it doesn't leave room in the side for Danny Welbeck, and two, it means Tony V not playing in his best position, which is obviously on the right of a 4 with 2 strikers to aim at. I don't know how well Tony V plays in a 4-2-3-1. Really, he certainly plays very wide in that formation.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not been tested in that. United basically never played exactly like that. I mean, with a kind of flexible front 3 or 4, and so that'll be a real test for United if United play like that. I somewhat suspect that Kagawa will not start the season, and we'll see United playing in a more familiar way, with perhaps Rooney just playing off Welbeck for the start of the season. We'll see. I mean, we should do a little prediction for this game, shouldn't we? I know opening day of the season is almost impossible to predict, but just for a laugh.
2-1 United, I reckon.
Very good. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. I'm starting the season on a positive note because, we know the reverse curse of the rank card is active here. So what's the reverse of 1-1?
It's like 7-7 or something, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's an interesting season ahead. Who do you think United's top scorer is going to be?
Rooney.
And top assist maker?
Valencia.
I'm going with Rooney, and I'm going to be ridiculous and go with Cleverley as well for that one. Last season I went for Hernandez to be United's top scorer, so I don't really know anything, obviously. Who do you think United's player of the season is going to be?
Rooney.
Okay, if you're not allowed to say Rooney, who do you think United's player of the season is going to be?
Vidic.
Okay, that's a good shout. Yeah, okay. I think it might be Carrick again. I think he's going to have to be if we're going to get anywhere.
Messi, because he's about to join. I've heard that he's at Carrington having a medical as we speak.
Van Persie, yes or no?
No. Of course course, reverse curse of the Rantcast, given that we are recording, as you said before, on Tuesday, and this is up on Friday. He'll probably signed and scored 17 goals already by the time he's joined.
Yeah, Van Persie to get to the winner in the 2-1 is my prediction against Everton. The other thing that I think's worth mentioning, we mentioned him in the great shirt giveaway, but the boy Bebe, he's not had a bad pre-season, has he?
Yes, well, let's put this into some perspective. United have played a couple of teams in South Africa that are of about League 2 standard, a team in China that was the reserve side of a side that was about League 2 standard, a Norwegian side which was maybe League 1 standard, and then Barcelona. And Hanover, of course. So, look, I can't take any credence from Bebe's performances in pre-season. He didn't look completely useless, which is a bonus. You know, he almost looked like he might be a footballer one day when he grows up.
Yeah, it'll be fun if he does. And then everyone can wear their Bebe shirt with pride. You know the United shirts this season? We've had a question from @Saraman187. Do you like them?
No, I hate them.
Do you hate the away one as well? Because I think
No, the away one's all right. I quite like the away one. It's quite smart. Yeah, that tea cloth is embarrassing.
Yeah, it's really terrible. First I was like, oh, it's not that bad. But you see it up close, really talking full-on picnic basket. You know, it's a picnic blanket. It's a very, very strange thing. But yeah, the away strip looks really, really classy.
Well, very good. We can look very, very classy while winning. What did we predict? The cop.
Do you think we're finally going to win the FA Cup this season, Ed?
Yes, there we go. Let's be positive. I think United are going to win the FA Cup. I think we're going to have a great campaign in the FA Cup. We'll get to the semi-final. We'll be playing Manchester City in the semi-final, and Ferguson would decide that he needs to rotate and we'll be playing the reserves in the semi. That's my prediction.
But then we'll win that, because you just said we were going to win it. So we'll win that game. Our reserves will beat them. Nick Powell will own Yaya Toure in that central midfield berth.
There's a song. Someone come out with some lyrics. I think that's our show done for the week, isn't it? First of the new season.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back up and running. We'll be here every single week through the season, barring international breaks, charting the ups and downs. I'm not expecting United to win everything in sight this season, so I'm going to be well philosophical when we lose. So that's a promise to everyone, and also an apology to everyone for the times I go, oh, you know, it's not that bad, it's only football. But Ed will be there banging the drum for, no, actually, this is really serious. So, you know, a bit of balance. The yin and the yang, as we like to provide. If you really enjoyed the show, and especially actually early in the season, incredibly helpful to us if you would be so kind as to write a nice review on iTunes. You can tweet at me at UTDRantcast and at Ed at UnitedRant. And the other thing that you can do is, if you want to help us with the running costs of the show, then head over to unitedrant.co.uk/donate.
And we can be millionaires like the Glazers too, or not.
Hooray! No, it's more in the range of one share than 10 million shares or whatever it is that they sold. Ed, thanks for your company, and listeners, we'll be back same time next week.
See you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.